Good morning. Okay. Let's get this moving. Hopefully, from yesterday's assignment with the rational numbers and simplifying stuff under square roots, hopefully you did that because that's going to be needed for today. We did skip section 1.2, which was kind of like story problems with linear equations because I'm not too worried about that with you guys. We will be doing story problems with quadratic equations soon, so it's not like we're skipping all story problems, just the ones that I don't think are needed. So, complex numbers are numbers that have an I in them, and an I is the same thing as the square root of -1. Because if you have a square root of, let's say you have a square root of like -16. Well, so 16 is easy to take a square root of, that's just 4, but you can't take the square root of a negative number because there's nothing there that will multiply. Like if you take -4 times -4, that will be positive 16, and you can't just take one positive and one negative when you're doing a square root. It has to be the same thing twice. So that's when we do an I. So the answer to this problem would be 4I to show that there was a negative under that square root. This is actually used a lot in especially electrical engineering. If you're thinking, but why does that make sense with anything? It's more like a process to get to a different answer. So maybe you're in the middle of a problem trying to figure it out, you end up with a square root. This is kind of like almost a placeholder for a while until you can make it no longer have an I in it. For example, if at some point you manipulate your equation to get an I squared, well, an I squared is the square root of -1 times the square root of -1, and that is the same thing as just -1. Because a square root times a square root would be -1 squared underneath there, so that would be like this. The square root of -1 squared. And a square root would undo itself, so you end up with -1. Okay, so let's do something a little harder. Let's say that you had the square root of -48. Well, if you break down -48, -48 breaks down into 16 and 3. Got to make one of them negative, doesn't matter which one. So that's like 4 square roots of 3. But because there's a negative under there, you got to remember that I, and the I goes on the outside. So this would be 4I square roots of 3. Now, I is actually, you treat it like a variable once it's as an I. So, for example, if you have something like this, where you're just adding them, so maybe you're taking this, 3 minus 4I plus -2 plus 6I, and you're adding everything together. You just add the regular numbers and you add the i's. So you would say, okay, so 3 plus -2 is 1, and -4 plus 6 is 2I, and that would be it. So, not complex. Well, I mean, it is literally complex, complex numbers, but it is not difficult because you can just treat it like a variable, which means that your homework is going to be pretty easy tonight. Okay, you try this one. -4 plus 3I minus 6 minus 7I. And remember, you can either think about subtracting both of those, or you can instead first distribute a -1 and then add them together. So your call. Pause the video, try it out. Sorry. Alright, I'm assuming that you tried it out. So I prefer to distribute the -1, but you might prefer to just subtract it in your head, your call. So -4 plus a -6 is -10, and 3I plus 7I is 10I. It's going to be a very quick lesson today, which is good for you because it's a Friday. I'm sure we're going to spend a lot of time in the classroom going over questions from the last 2 assignments. So, example 5 is multiplying them. This is where we're more talking about bringing it back into reality and not having those eyes anymore. Or at least sometimes not having eyes and sometimes yes having eyes. Alright, now we're going to try to multiply these two together. Remember, just treat it like a variable, but then the goal is that anytime you see an I squared at the end, you can turn an I squared into -1. We probably should write that really big. I squared equals -1. Like that is the big takeaway so that you remember it. This is amazing. There's like a guy here who's like, what? Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that that's a thing. Okay. So if you're multiplying these together, you can either use FOIL or you can use a box. Your choice. Alright, so this is a 6. That's a -9i, 8i, and this is -12i squared. So if I start combining them, I say, okay, I've got 6 minus 1i minus 12i squared. But then the I squared becomes -1. Because the square root of -1 times the square root of -1 is -1. And then you put them all together. So -12 times the -1 is +12, so that's 18 minus I. Last one. You try this one. 4 plus 3i squared. Go ahead, try it out. Pause the video. Pause it. Okay, I'm assuming you paused it. Now, hopefully you didn't just try to distribute the square and quit. I'm hoping that you said that this was 4 plus 3i times 4 plus 3i and then did a box or FOIL. Maybe I'll do FOIL this time. So first times first is 16. Let's see, first outer, inner, and last makes 16 plus 24i plus 9i squared. And then we're going to replace the I squared with a -1. So really that's like -9, so this would be 7 plus 24i. Yep. I'm really sorry I'm coughing so much today. This cold is just not going away. This has been forever now. It's going to be the rest of my life. Alright, your homework should go just as fast as this lesson did. Hopefully. And you'll be done quickly and you can enjoy your weekend. Alright guys, as usual, it is a pleasure to be your teacher. And I'm hoping that you do have a good weekend and a relaxing one at that. I'll see you Monday. Bye.